It's good to see you all here. I hope you've been enjoying the symposium this week. If you went to see George Bach last night, you probably had a really good time. There was a bunch of kissing and touching, and I personally had a great time. Before I introduce the speaker tonight, I'd like to call to your attention this sheet that you've been handed. At your convenience, just, if you would, label it male or female, and then check if you agree or disagree, or if you're in between on it. And then at the end of the lecture, there'll be a question and answer period. And if you have questions during Annis Gross's lecture, would you write them on the back of the sheet, and we'll collect them, and we'll try to answer your questions at the end. Tomorrow, I'd like to bring to your attention that the symposium is continuing. It's our final day, and tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., there will be a panel discussion with Annis Gross and Dr. Lonnie Myers regarding contraception. That's 10 a.m. in the Great Hall. I'd like to tell you right now that Dr. Lonnie Myers is sitting in the audience, and if you can meet her right now, if she would just stand up. Really a great lady. I picked her up at the airport today. Okay, then tomorrow there'll be a lunch with Lonnie Myers, Annis Gross, and Dr. David Walther at 12 noon in the Cyclone Cellar. Then Dr. Walther in the Oak Room at 2 p.m. will present a lecture or a discussion titled Vicious Sexual Games We Play with Intimates. The topic is symbols, self, and sexuality. And then tomorrow night at 8 p.m. in Great Hall, Dr. Lonnie Myers will present a lecture on Do the Sexperts Really Tell You Everything You Want to Know? The topic is Biased Teaching, Preaching Conventional Sex Only. Lonnie Myers is by no means conventional. It should be really interesting. One more thing. The lecture, or the tape of this lecture, will be available to you in the library, in the Reference Center and Resource Room, Room 50, in about a week, if you'd like to hear it. Also, the presentation of this broadcast will be on Saturday morning at 11 a.m. on the University Lecture Series. We'll give it 2 weeks on WOI. And now I'd like to introduce to you Annis Gross. She is presently living in Denver, Colorado, and her title is, or her present position is, she is the Associate Director of Family Planning of the Colorado Health Department. Since 1963, Annis Gross has been involved with Planned Parenthood and family planning. She was the co-founder of Planned Parenthood in Keokuk, Iowa in 1963. For many years, she worked in Keokuk. I was living in Keokuk at the time, and so this is how I became associated with Annis Gross. We've been close friends since this. She's really a great lady. I remember I went through high school. Her two daughters, Annis and Kayla, were in my graduating high school class. And I remember quite a few of my friends would go over and talk to Annis about, their sexual problems or their date problems or pregnancy, abortion, or anything. She was always very willing to help, very warm, friendly person. In general, a lovely lady. And so, tonight, Annis is going to be speaking on how and when to talk about it if we're going to do it. So now I'd like to present to you Annis Gross.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Rick. It was a nice introduction. I'm delighted to be in Iowa and to be here with all of you. It was in Iowa where my husband and my children and I made our homes for 23 years. My roots are deep in this state. 2 of my 3 children live in Des Moines, and this state is filled with happy memories and good friends, and I've enjoyed seeing so many of you here. It is in Iowa that I began my family planning career 9 exciting years ago, and I welcome the Planned Parenthood friends I have and other friends and my son who just arrived and almost late, those of you that are here with me tonight. These past 9 years for me have been like a ride on a comet's tail. I started in family planning from the position of a traditional mother and housewife. And as I helped to create a family planning program, I became aware of all the changes that I was making in myself as a woman, a wife, a mother. And I'm much changed now in philosophy, thought, and awareness from where I was then. And who knows where I'll be 10 years more from now. It's hard to work in a family planning program and deal with people and their sexuality and not grow and change. It was in these past 9 years that I even granted freedom to me and equality to men through a very unusual thought process. And I find myself involved in many unusual thought processes. But I remember using a motel bathroom during a workshop and being constantly irritated because the toilet lid was up each time I needed to use the toilet. The women in the audience, I'm sure, can understand my discomfort. A cold porcelain seat's a little hard to take. My first thought each time was, those damn men, why couldn't they put the seat down? And suddenly it dawned on me, why should they? It was my responsibility to structure for my own needs. And why was it any more right for men to put the toilet seat down for women than for women to raise the lid for men? Certainly, us delicate little souls are capable of lowering a toilet seat. I made a major philosophical change from this little episode, and while some of my friends perceived it as a joke, I really did move from there. There are almost as many men as women in our society, and I decided let each person raise or lower the lid according to their sex and their needs. I have now granted me the freedom to take care of my needs and equality to men. They don't need to take care of me any longer. Through the years that I've worked in Planned Parenthood of Southeast Iowa, and now in family planning programs for the state of Colorado, I've become increasingly aware of the need for honest, open communication between all peoples, and especially between those peoples that our programs serve. Sex is a form of communication, an intimate form to be sure, an expression of the innermost self, but only one of many intimate communication forms. Many times much is lacking in human sexual communication, as in all other communications. I am confident and hopeful that this workshop will offer some valuable tools to all of us, and that each of us will come away from it with a better understanding of ourselves and of each other. I would like at this time to share some slides with you that I feel are an appropriate opening for my communication with you tonight. wish I could take the credit for producing it, and all I did was choose it. This little film strip is saying that we are endowed with bodies that are sexually complete with genitalia. Society and our culture program us not to use our sexuality and not to enjoy our bodies unless the conditions are just right, unless we play by the rules. Rules which say things like, sex is great when you're married. I don't know what happens to it all the years before you get married. Marriage is the initiation rite to sex. You are not a sexual being until you reach a prescribed age, especially women. We have a double standard. You are to express your sexuality only to one chosen mate. And I don't think this is a reality either. So many of us live with guilt and fear, with restricted marriages, with limited experiences, mistaking sex for sexuality, and never reaching our potential for growth and fulfillment. And it's at this time that I'd like you to deal with that questionnaire. I'd like you to fill those out alone, and then I want you to turn to your partner. And if there are odd people, if you don't come out in even couples, then include 3. I don't mean odd people in the audience, odd numbers. I would like you to fill those out alone, then talk to your partner and see if you can reach a consensus of agreement or disagreement. Then, as Rick said, we would like those turned in. I would like you to each indicate if you're male or female filling out the questionnaire. And then we'll go on with the discussion. After you've filled it out alone, turn to your neighbor and discuss it and see if you can both agree or reach a disagreement on a topic. I'll give you about 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll get back to it. But I'll be happy to answer any questions later that I can concerning these topics, as well as any other questions you might have on my other remarks. It's my understanding that our panel discussion tomorrow with Dr. Lonnie Myers will deal more with any of the aspects of contraception that we end up dealing with. And be sure to write your questions and then turn them in. The topic for this evening is if we're going to do it, sex. Then I ask you to consider first that we must assume the responsibility for our own behavior. We must also assume responsibility for our thoughts, our feelings, our fantasies, our dreams, our sexuality. Our sexuality is an integral part of us. If we are going to incorporate sex into our lifestyle, if we are going to be honest with ourselves, if we are going to like ourselves, then we must be accepting of our own behavior and of our own sexuality. This means we must then accept the responsibility of being a sexual human being and then be willing to make a full and real commitment to what we're doing, which may or may not mean sex activity. In terms of sharing and intimacy and communication, if you don't know yourself, how can you share and be intimate with another? This is how we get a lot of mixed or phony or conflicting messages from and about each other. We were talking about this in terms of color last night. I guess red's supposed to be a come-on color, and blue's supposed to be a send-away color, and a few of us were wearing both. So I guess we're sending out conflicting messages. This means the responsibility for doing it, sex, and talking about it, contraception, is on each of you partners as individuals. It is up to you to assume the responsibility individually for sex and contraception. You can really deal only with you. You can really be responsible only to you. You alone can feel your feelings. You only can reap your rewards or pay your prices for your own behavior, and only you must be prepared to do this. It is erroneous to place the total responsibility for sex and contraception on the other partner. It is certainly not up to the male to protect the female from sex or an unwanted pregnancy. It is her responsibility to care enough for herself that she so structures her life to avoid that which she doesn't want. It is also not up to the woman to assume the total responsibility for the man and for his sex wishes, or for his wish not to father a child. He must assume the responsibility for his role in the relationship and responsibility of a possible pregnancy and how it will affect him, his feelings, his self-image. Is it the man or woman that initiates conversation about sex in your relationship, or is there a conversation? Is it the man or woman who talks about contraception in your relationship, or is there a conversation? It might be wise to clarify, once you've made the decision for individual responsibility, which of you will use a method. Otherwise, you may be using pills and condoms, which may be a slight overkill. It might be equally wise to discuss whether sex will be a part of the relationship or not, in terms of what each of you want for yourselves and for each other. As an individual, your needs are the most important. No one really gets what they want in a relationship unless they define for themselves what it is they want. There are some good tools to help you define what it is you want. Talk with the person in your life, and each of you start 3 sentences and complete them. And the sentences are, 1, I am blank. And that takes a lot of thinking through sometimes. I want blank. I need blank. And once you've written these out and explored yourselves and explored together, you may reach a few conclusions about yourselves. We must then explore many issues: self-perception, female roles, male roles, societal programming for marriage and for parenthood, truth and honesty, to ourselves first and foremost, and to others, which easily follows if we're honest with ourselves. Peer pressure, sexual decision-making, sexual communication, values, and ethics. You might begin by asking yourself, what is the relationship really about? What are our honest feelings about it? Is it what we really want? Is it free and open? Is it exploitation of the partner? Do I feel guilty about it? Do I have fears and anxieties? If so, be honest, be open, talk it out, and explore. It is up to each of us to structure for our own needs. I remember once wanting to touch the hand of a dear friend as he lit my cigarette, and I didn't. I touched my own hand instead. I was afraid that touching him would be an infringement into his boundaries. I was not at that time important enough to me, and so I put his imagined needs before mine. How did I know he didn't need touching also? How could I assume for him? I was afraid of risk-taking, of being an aggressive woman, of his rejection. Women in our society have been punished for being strong and aggressive. It's okay for males, but women aren't to be strong and aggressive. I let this put all the initiative for my needs on him, to touch my hand only if and when he wished, not if and when I wished. I soon realized that it was my need, and I was important, and I take the initiative. We've been scripted for so long to sit back and wait until the other person makes the move. And I think this is especially true for women. It is not my responsibility to protect my friend's borders. I could only take care of mine. And from this, another philosophical change. You must realize that your strength and your validity come from inside you, not from outside, not from other people, but from how you see yourself. Too many people have spent too many years of their lives always belonging to someone else, never being their own person, being someone's son or daughter, husband or wife, mother or father. And then comes a traumatic loneliness, divorce or death. The children leave home, friends move, and all the outside belonging is gone, and you have only you to live with, which is what you ever really had anyway, and you have only you to deal with. I remember the 3 elderly widows who recently came to visit our home, so lost, having no one to do for, never having found their own strengths and validations, living their whole lives through someone else's needs, never their own. They, like so many others, will live and die without ever having lived. The primary life focus for true fulfillment must be on finding you. Who are you? And all about you, and most of all, liking and loving you and your body and all it contains, and accepting your sexuality as a part of what you are. Then a most important question is, how do I perceive myself and my body? And those of us that were in Dr. Bach's workshop this morning had a lot of fun with how we perceived our bodies. I think he gave us some nasties and some goodies about ourselves to evaluate. And you might really use this as a great tool in evaluating how you feel. We've been programmed by the media to be the body beautiful and the image flawless. Learn to like yourselves as you are, lumps and bumps and flaws and zits and all. We weren't all genetically structured to be flawless. Our concept of physical beauty bears a lot of revision. Dr. Mark Held, a sex counselor with the University of Colorado, stated once that the most attractive and the least attractive people get the most sexually involved at the earlier ages and are sometimes the most confused. The most attractive receive the most peer pressure and the most opposite sex pressure. The least attractive are self-pressured to give more to get. How do you perceive yourselves? As a sex object, as parts and pieces, or as a whole person with much to offer others and satisfied with yourself? Don't enter into the competition for Miss America or Mr. America. Don't be a man or woman of the Playboy ethic. We're under a great deal of pressure from parents, peers, the media, our whole culture. And the one thing we've got to learn is to trust our own feelings. Listen to what you are really feeling. Don't listen to the shoulds that have been programmed into you. Shoulds such as, you should date Joe, he's a real catch. That goes on in the women's dorms and the sorority houses. You should have sex with me because I need you. Never mind listening to your own needs, only listen to mine. You should be the perfect stud and lover, you men, so put the make on her, even though you're totally uncomfortable about it. How many of us here, you should be getting married soon? You should have grandchildren for us, your parents. Listen to what you want. Ignore the shoulds. Obligations and shoulds are part of the heritage of having good manners and being civilized. But the basic reason for good manners and shoulds are to hide or deny the real feelings that we have. And one classic example of this is a state dinner, where heads of state sit down together and toast each other and hate each other's guts. And another should is always being very nice to someone we really don't like at all. And if we're very nice to them, they won't suspect we don't like them. And we won't suspect we don't like them. Also realize what your peer pressures are doing to you. Women put a great deal of pressure on other women. They compare dates, they compare sex activity, they compare bodies, and men do the same things. And they are in and you are out. You're the outsider, and if you're not doing what they're doing, you're out. And I think it's time to have your own strengths and your own wisdoms to realize that they may not be in and you may not be out. Make free choices based on your feelings and your needs, not programmed by societal pressures. You are important. Don't ever be afraid to say no to whatever doesn't feel right for you, including sex. Listen to your own feelings. Women compete for men and men compete for women and for what they perceive as societal acceptance. They don't even see each other as people. It reflects in our dress. We send out not true signals sometimes by what we wear, commanding someone to have a certain opinion of us. Women are committed to fashion magazines, which, by the way, is women putting the pressure on other women, but men are making the cash on it. And I don't know what the most popular magazine is on your campus. We dye our hair, we wear makeup, nail polish, all sorts of phony subterfuges. And it's okay if it's fun and if it fits for you, but only if you can like yourself as you are also. I recently had a very short haircut, and I washed my own hair for the first time in 20 years after the beauty parlor routine, and I felt like I just achieved a whole new head freedom. I like to swim, and the beauty parlor hair was a real hassle. Now my head fits into my lifestyle. It's not each hair perfect, but it's free. I can always go back to a beauty parlor if I wish, but I've got options now. Now where are each of you? Locked in or free thinking? Making choices or following the rules and programs? Also remember that a woman that's on contraception or is considering herself a liberated woman doesn't mean she's available to anyone at any time. You can always say no. Remember, too, we are not so omnipotent that our no will shatter the other person. His ego is not so fragile. Don't put him down by being dishonest. Know yourself and avoid defenses, paranoia, loneliness. You may reach out to someone in an attempt to fill your own needs and see their rejection of what you offer them, and it could be sex, as a rejection of you. In truth, it may be anything but. It may be that they have other needs, fears, doubts about themselves in the relationship. Don't perceive each situation as a self-rejection. It's the other person's problem that you may be totally unaware of. We see this all the time in date refusals. Look at the other guy's side. It's not you. Be open to all sorts of relationships with no expectations, no preset ideas, which may lead only to disappointment. You must be here now, open and aware. It is only by finding and loving yourself that you can reach an honest, open relationship with another. Meet people as people, not as sex objects, not with the expectations of the relationship. Just open to friendship and whatever they have to offer you and whatever you are ready and wanting to receive from them. All sorts of things then begin to come together. You must process your own knowledge and information. You must establish your own values, ethics, morals, and goals. You must be flexible and open and weigh and measure the situation. Listen to your feelings. Be aware of where you're at now. Apply situational ethics. You may never be sure you're right. I went through years of parenting, making all sorts of decisions and always questioning, was it the right decision? And I realize now, years later, that I never knew I was right because I wasn't operating from a series of rules and boxes. I was just trying to weigh and measure what was right for the situation. It's easier in many ways to live by pre-digested and pre-programmed rules, being very rigid, very structured, very closed. You'll miss a lot, and you'll never know why your life is not fulfilling and exciting and rewarding. The only decisions you can make are for you and are yours. No one else can assume the responsibility for you. It is a decision on your part to avoid reality. If you think the decision for your sexual activity or contraceptive responsibility belongs to someone else, you have, by your passivity, made a decision also to hold the other guy responsible for you. And it's time we grew up and assumed our own responsibilities. Remember that each choice we make may have both advantages and disadvantages. You must weigh for yourself. Are you going to have spur-of-the-minute sex as though you had no control? You must think it through and establish standards for yourself. It's okay to say no also. We must stop denying ourselves and what we're doing. Sex is not just a happening. It is happening because we allow it or subconsciously structure it or deliberately plan it. What about respect for the other person's feelings and learning to deal with them and with our own feelings? Don McCammon, a medical social consultant from the Nebraska Health Department, suggests that we learn to avoid using judgment, which is blaming and condemning you for my reaction to what you are feeling or experiencing. Helping, we should avoid helping. No one can be responsible for others, only for themselves. And the helper is usually helping himself by helping others. Each person must experience their own feelings and deal with them. Don't think you're giving the other person sex to help them or because they need you. You better look at who you're really helping, and the answer is you. Shoulds are another thing we better not deal with. If you imply that a person should feel a particular way, it will obscure their real experience. If you are experiencing something, experience it. If you are avoiding something, realize you are avoiding. Be aware of it, the real feeling. Begin to know yourself. If you are sad, know it. If you are joyous, for heaven's sakes, rejoice. Explaining, and this is seeking causes and reasons, interpretations, and explaining are all ways of avoiding your feelings. If you begin to explain your experience, you lose contact with the experience itself. As with all honest communication, sexual communication means understanding and accepting your sexuality, your own behavior, and being able to honestly discuss your own feelings with peers of both sexes and people of all ages. You need to exchange not only feelings, but information, opinions, attitudes. Open discussion helps build a basis of understanding and trust and will help in all of your personal interactions. Last May, I attended a Planned Parenthood meeting in Sioux City. One of the workshops was done by Planned Parenthood of Iowa and included an open discussion of sexuality and some very frank films. During the films, I looked around the room, and only a handful were comfortable enough to establish eye contact with me. Remember, these were all professionals, too. After the films, we broke into small groups to discuss our own sexual feelings so that we might better understand ourselves before we counsel others. Only a few of us felt free enough to share our experiences, but as we did, I felt a tremendous wave of sister solidarity and then of people solidarity. All the same sorts of experiences had happened to each of us, as little girls and as women, and also to little boys and men. I suddenly realized the oneness of all of us, the bond of being sexual human beings. All the feelings I'd ever had of guilt or shame or regret vanished as we openly discussed and shared. We were as one because we were open and sharing, and we each were aware of it for the first time. Derek Calderwood, in his program about your sexuality, says that sex can be a positive and enriching factor in our lives. Some expression of sexual outlet is normal and happens at all ages. He further says, there are no automatic, inevitable, physical or psychological consequences of any form of sexual behavior, but a wide range of possible outcomes. There is no positive right or wrong, only what's right for you. Intelligent decisions are possible with good information and reliable knowledge. It's up to you to see that you get what you need. Don't sit like a great turkey and allow the bastings of knowledge or information to be poured over you. Seek for yourselves. For heaven's sakes, be self-basting. You can get good books. You can talk with good resource people. You can read. You can discuss. You can make your own decisions based on what you process. Avoid playing dishonest games. Avoid hustling each other. Betty, my young friend, told me she hates pickup bars, and I call this the hustling place. She calls them meat factories, where the fellows come in and inventory the bodies. It's chauvinistic and sad, she said, especially when your body doesn't get chosen. This is as true for men and women as for women. Do you want to be on the meat block? It is not possible in a pluralistic society to reach a consensus about sex values. We possess no code of sex beliefs about which we can agree. There are moral decisions which people must make for themselves. We have 6 major conflicting value systems of sex in this transitional period of morality, maybe mortality too. You must choose what best fits for you. We have the traditional repressive asceticism, which proscribes any kind of sexual activity outside of the marriage relationship and accepts sex in marriage grudgingly and probably in the dark, and it links sex only with procreation. Then we have enlightened asceticism, which says that youth is a time when lessons of self-control and discipline must be learned. Sex is a supreme area in which self-mastery must be demonstrated. And I think this is what Lonnie Myers was referring to when she said abstinence was a good method. I'm sure she said it in total sarcasm, don't misunderstand me. Humanistic radicalism, which proposes society make it possible for young people to have relatively complete sex freedom. Humanistic liberalism, in which the criteria of morality is not the omission or commission of a particular act, but the consequences of the act upon the interrelationships of people. Fun morality, which holds that sex is fun, and the more fun a human being has, the better and psychologically sounder they are likely to be. Sexual anarchy, which attacks chastity, virginity, monogamy, and calls for a suppression of all anti-sexual taboos and the disappearance of the notions of sexual immorality and shame. It imposes only one restriction: no one may injure or do violence to his fellows. If you are indoctrinated with an elaborate set of rigid rules and ready-made formula, you are only ensuring the early obsolescence of these rules. It would be great to have faith in the free play of critical intelligence and respect for truth as a definable moral value. We must have respect for the basic worth, equality, and dignity of each individual, the right of self-determination of each human being, the need for cooperative effort for our common good in a relationship. Society has placed many outdated and false values on us. It is time to re-examine what is true and valid and real. We've all been programmed from birth that we will someday marry and have children, and we no longer hold these truths to be self-evident. Not all people will marry or want to marry. The new lifestyles seem to be evidence to this. And the old lifestyles with the high divorce rates, the unhappy marriages, the prevailing dishonest and restricting relationships in a traditional marriage seem to bear evidence to this. Many conflicting cultural forces tell a young girl to be sexy, to find her validation through love, to be responsive, to be uninhibited and emancipated, but save yourself for the right marriage. It is equally true that many a man is looked upon as a societal outcast or as denying someone if he doesn't marry, and society certainly asks, what's wrong with both of them if they don't have children? I am convinced that we achieve immortality by the interactions we have with other people and the impacts we have on each other in our encounters. I can remember one day talking in a restaurant with a very troubled young waitress, and we were so delighted to find each other. And she asked me, what sent you in here today when I really needed to talk with you? I'd never seen her before or since, but I shall never forget her impact on me. I don't know if she'll even remember the encounter. And now I share my experience with you. We meet, each of us the products of our total experiences, and we take something from the encounter, and it spreads. To me, this is immortality. It is not necessary to have the children to join the universal gene pool. Just be open to people, and you shall live forever. People have such a need to leave something of themselves in the universal people pool. It need not be children. It need be only your encounters with others. My daughter recently fantasized an interesting concept. She saw our interactions as rays of sun going into a plant, and the great magnitude of oxygen the plants give off for all the world to breathe. This is immortality. What we are as people becomes a part of the universe. It's not just through having children that we live. As for training for marriage and parenthood, both are left to chance. So seek for yourselves. But I think the best training for each is to know yourself, accept yourself, and love yourself. Men have a heavy load. They've got to be strong, smart, sexually perfect, all-knowing. They can't express their feelings. They can't admit to having sex problems. We women who are allowed to be weak can cry, we can express feelings, we can make mistakes, we can talk to one another about problems. Men must make all the advances and decisions. Women must assume equal rights to structure for their own needs and to relieve men of the unfair burden. I can remember telling my daughters it was wrong to call boys on the telephone. You have to sit there and wait till they called you first. And boy, was I mistaken. Most men can't easily admit to needing more sex knowledge. Women can. Roles are now blurring a bit, thankfully, as we realize we can each do what we must to survive. However, society and culture still impose, very subtly or very blatantly, what the female or male role is or should be. Sherry Tepper of Rocky Mountain Planned Parenthood in Colorado wrote a paper which said that no one has the right to deny freedom to anyone else. Ownership of one person by another is wrong. The exploitation of women, often self-imposed, and I've seen a lot of women imposing their own problems on themselves, or self-allowed, is wrong. In many cultures and society, women have no right to property, no rights to decisions, no right in determining their own lives. Women were, in effect, owned by men, and this is wrong. The modern woman has 2 or 3 children. We hope it'll only be 2. If she has her first child at 24, her second child at 26, at age 44, her baby is 18 years old, and she now has a life expectancy of over 70 years. So she's going to have 30 years of an empty nest. She had better plan what to do with all of her years, whether she wishes children or not, and if so, how to deal with her own life and time and validation. She had better find her strength and her own meaning if she is ever to achieve happiness, and she had better work to find all of her rights and freedoms. The male must also find fulfillment and be accepting of his mate's right to do her own thing, as women have been of men through all these years. No one can own or control in a healthy relationship. It is only through finding self and individual freedoms that we stop laying power trips and controls on each other. Contraception, how and when do we talk about it? How? With honesty, openness, maturity, facts, knowledge, willingness to assume responsibility for you, your bodies, your minds, your sexuality, your life, with respect for your partner, his or her needs and feelings, and most of all, awareness of self. When do we talk about it? The moment you are ready to make a sexual decision for yourself, based on your needs, your body, your mind, your sexuality, your life, with respect for your partner, his or her needs and feelings, and most of all, awareness of self. Thank you.
I'll give you a minute or two here, and if you have any questions, maybe you'd write them down on the back of this questionnaire, and then pass them to the center row, and we'll pick them up at that point. After the question and answer period, we'll show the film strip again. Some people have requested seeing it again.
May I suggest that those of you that are able to remain, fill in the gaps, and then we can deal with a smaller group. Those of you that are sitting in the back and want to remain for a question and answer time, please move up front. Pardon?
We're going to show this film strip over again right now for the people that'd like to see it, and then after this we'll have questions from the floor and those that have been handed to me, okay? Are there any questions or comments or statements? I'll give you one.
Okay.
Okay, this is written. Annis. Don't manners, customs, laws, and shoulds help structure relationships so people know where they're at without having to start all over every time they meet? Can't laws have a positive function if they are not made too rigid?
Kind of a tough question. I suppose there's some place for some rules and some laws, but what I'm really trying to say is to be in touch with your own feelings. And that so many times we all live by what we should do instead of what we really want to do. We're really never in touch with our own feelings. We don't listen to them, and we've obscured them with a whole bunch of societal programming. I can remember one night sitting in Aspen, Colorado. I wanted desperately to be in another place, but I wasn't in another place. I was there. So I made up my mind that that was where I was going to enjoy being. How many times have you said, I should be in a class right now? I should be doing some studying right now. But you're not doing it. Here you are. And this is where do your feelings tell you really want to be? Now, if you're going to be here, enjoy it. If you're not here, then forget about where you should be. The reality is this is where you are. And in terms of feelings, it's exactly the same thing. Don't do what you should do. Do what you feel right about doing, which certainly may include some pre-programmed rules and laws that you are comfortable living with. It doesn't mean it all has to go. But live only with what you're willing to be responsible for. I don't know if that answered it. It's a pretty hard question.
There's a second part to this. What do you think of Masters and Johnson's recent statement that the pendulum has swung too far and that intercourse should probably be more or less confined to marriage?
I wasn't aware that Masters and Johnson made that statement. Is that really a statement they made? I'm not so sure that, I can't answer that intercourse should be confined to marriage, because I think that has to be a decision each person has to make for themselves. Again, we're back to individual responsibility. It's not up to me to decide that intercourse is proper only in marriage, nor is it appropriate for Masters and Johnson if they did make that statement. I think, again, it must be a statement that it must be something each of you is going to deal with. Are you going to be comfortable with intercourse outside of marriage? If you are, and it feels good for you, and it's right and appropriate for you, do it.
One last written question. Which is safer, IUDs or the pill?
In terms of contraceptive effectiveness, the pill is probably the safer method, but not all women can use the pill. It's safer in terms of prevention of pregnancy. It may not be safer for the individual woman. Some women have contraindications against using pills, in which case the IUD may be the safer method for her. Foam or condoms may be yet a safer method if she can't use either of the others. Anything is safer than nothing, including withdrawal and rhythm. Anything is safer than nothing, remember that. I think, again, that has to be a medical decision. Probably the pills are more effective. The IUD would be the second most effective, but it's going to depend on what's suitable for the person to use. You know, another thing, too, for those that are having only occasional sex, have you ever asked yourself about some of the other methods? I think the diaphragm is a method that probably could be used a great deal more. I know there's a lot of aesthetic loss, but for somebody who's having sex only once in a while, why take a pill every day? Or why have an IUD on the chance possibility that once in 6 months you might have sex? You know, you might consider some other kinds of methods.
Are there any questions? Just random
Questions, conversations?
conversation, symposium.
Well, I think we find that in the Planned Parenthood service centers and in the family planning service clinics. Yes, sometimes we've always made it a point never to ask anyone's religion, but sometimes in like 2 minutes, the woman will blurt out, well, I'm Catholic, but, and you haven't asked her, and you know she's got a head problem. I think what you need to do then is to help her work through her feelings, you know, about what is it? Is she going to trade a headache for an upset stomach? Or is she going to trade the fears and concerns about the religion for the contraceptive method? And I think you have to help her with her decision, yes. We do run into people who have head problems. It's part of any good family planning program counseling. We're not just dealing with parts and pieces. Sometimes the clinics get so big you find that you are, and then you really hate it. You really wish that you have time to do all the counseling that's necessary. We find a lot of people come in and they're very motivated and they're very sure of where they're at and they want a good contraceptive method and they want contraceptive information and they're not having head problems. I think this is true with vasectomy also. We find men coming in that want to talk about vasectomy or women wanting to talk about sterilization. Others have head problems and it's soon pretty obvious. I think it is something that has to be talked through and worked through if somebody is having a problem with it. Are you finding this in the Planned Parenthood clinics?
You have to help me decipher this. Let's see. How do you advise a young girl, early middle adolescence, when she questions whether her mate should know she uses the pill, especially to the idea that she'll be an easy lay, will go down for anybody? And secondly, how do you counsel an adolescent who has fear of being caught in the backseat of a car in the country, on the Davenport, etc., to feel comfortable in sex and to enjoy it fully when really having limited privacy?
That's another toughie, too. Well, I think that people have to be comfortable with what they're doing. If she's having a lot of fears and doubts, then maybe she needs to work through her feelings that this isn't what she really wants to do at all. And she may be getting a lot of peer pressure that's saying, you know, oh, everybody's having sex now. I think there are girls coming into Planned Parenthood centers now for birth control who really have no intention of using it. It's just so they can carry their birth control pills with them. I shouldn't say a lot, a few. You remember the days when fellas carried condoms in their wallets until the dust would roll out of them when they took them out? And I'm beginning to wonder now if the package of pills in the purse may be the same sort of thing. Anybody who is having real concerns about being caught or being uncomfortable either has to structure a better environment for a sex activity or has to decide that maybe this isn't what she wants to do at all. And I think I spoke to the fact that the woman who is on contraception is not necessarily an easy lay. She has made a decision to protect her reproduction or her non-reproduction, but she still has free choices as to who she is going to use her birth control with, and that has to be her choice. And maybe it's somebody else's problem if they perceive her as being an easy lay.
I think a lot of guys carry, you know, condoms in their billfold just in case something comes up.
That could be too. Oh, that's pretty Freudian, Rick.
Any questions, just ask freely.
As you've worked for 9 years in Planned Parenthood, are you finding that women, in fact, are becoming more confident meeting their own needs in terms of standing up for what they believe in? You know, like 9 years ago, did you find they were more just going along with whatever the man said, and now they're becoming more self-sufficient?
You know, I think that depends so much where, if it's an urban area or a rural area. The things that we're perceiving here in terms of women getting freed up, or the things that we're talking about, is not what's happening in rural areas or in, I'm thinking of the Chicano populations that we deal with in Colorado, in the rural areas. They are such a far cry from knowing that they have any other options but to be the brood sow. That's their total life role, and they do have problems with being a contraceptor because they don't have any other option. I mean, if they're not the mother, they're nothing. And so, we're sitting in an academic environment, and we're dealing with women who are pretty well educated and pretty well freed up and who are free thinkers. But I can think of the thousands and thousands of women that are coming into all of the service programs that are so far away from this that it's really sad. And we've got to do a great deal in efforts to raise consciousness to the fact that women do have other options.
I guess in response to that, in terms of doing programs with college women on this campus, I am appalled at some of the attitudes that they still do hold, and that's why I was wondering, you know, I really like what you said about freeing up and being responsible and going with your own needs, but I don't think that that's, well, my judgment is that many of the women here are not that far at all, even in academic communities.
I would agree with you. I think one of our hopes is that we can reach some of them so they can go out and be teachers and social workers and nurses and doctors, and that the men can be carrying the messages to other people to help them find their freedoms. And I would have to agree with you, too, that our societal programming is so subtle that it's very difficult to be aware of where you really are. I don't think a lot of us never make free decisions at all. We're programmed from the day we're born that we're going to be parents. And, you know, in all the toys that we have, all the advertising, all of the whatever. I mean, it's just built right in that you're going to parent, you're going to marry, and you're going to parent. Well, now some of the rules are changing in terms of marriage. But in terms of parenting, I think it's still a pretty tight thing. You know, if you look at every single commercial and see the woman walking through the fields, you know, with her lovely cologne, and now there's a little child with her, and they're roaming together. You know, and it's just a very subtle thing. And, you know, in terms of the programming that's laid on us, many of us really never think through enough to make free choices and to overcome what the programming is really saying. And I think you're right. And I think one of your roles as educators has got to be to bring a lot more awareness to people.